Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Michael, it is March 20th, and you and I have not seen each other in 3 weeks.
You've been off gallivanting
I've been off
and
gallivanting
enjoying yourself.
Yeah. So it's been 3 weeks. A lot has happened.
As usual, when we meet, a lot has happened.
A lot has happened,
and I think maybe we could say it's always the case if you're paying attention.
Yes. Yeah. So what are the three things? There are three things that you wanted to cover specifically today, and there's one thing that I want to cover before we get into that. But let's go over because those three things are related to a greater subject that
yes,
a greater principle that you want.
So we've been saying, we like to talk thematically here on the podcast, but we try to apply it to what's going on. In particular, this year, what are the themes that are going to feed into decisions that are made later this year in elections and in public policy, I think you could say. But it struck me during the last week, and I texted you about this, that there's three things going on that seem to have some synergy, some connection. And in the end, they are about standoffs. They are about unresolved conflict that we don't know how they're going to turn out, and they're really important. One is funding for DHS. This has been going on since the government shut down more than a month, I think maybe 6 or 7 weeks, something like that. We have the SAVE Act, where Trump has said he's not going to approve any legislation until the SAVE Act is approved. That's basically about voter identification and secondarily about immigration and whether they are managing to vote without being properly authenticated.
An illegal immigrant or someone who's not a citizen can't vote even if they are properly authenticated. You have to be a citizen to vote.
Well, the law says, but there's suspicion that a lot of them are voting.
Yes.
And so this is the basis of the intense controversy. Mm-hmm. And I used, by the way, the word authentication intentionally because that's a word used in information technology about making sure you're talking to the person you think you're talking to.
Yes.
If you call a bank, you call anybody, they're going to want passwords and social security numbers and things like that. It's all called authentication. It's really important because you don't want somebody else calling in and moving money in your bank who's not you.
That's correct.
Right.
Yep.
So voter ID is really a form of authentication for
Sure.
one of the most important civic acts that we do.
Sure.
And then the third sort of unresolved issue is Iran. We're now more than 2 weeks into this war, although you might call it a military action. It's not a declared war. We haven't sent in troops on the ground. What is war, quote unquote, that requires the Congress to authorize? But it definitely is a big conflict and has been called war by Trump and others, whether it has the specific legal meaning or not. But the point, I guess, maybe is that we are in this conflict and we don't know how and when we're going to get out. And it's an unresolved issue about how that question is going to be managed.
Right.
Who's going to decide to get us out and under what terms?
Well, and then also the difference is in the way that the two parties are looking at that particular issue is also like the other two issues we're bringing up.
Yes.
They're different.
Yeah, and but when I say they're connected, one way of putting it is that each of those is a big inflection point, I think, for the future. How are we going to manage ourselves with regard to immigration enforcement, with regard to voting, and with regard to big foreign policy confrontations like we've had in Venezuela and now Iran?
Right. But before we get to that, Mike, there's one issue that I want to kind of bring up. It's not really related to this, but it is related to the topic that we talk about over and over again, and that is cause and effect when you have a change in public policy.
Yes.
And what that does.
Right.
In the state of Washington, both houses of the legislature in the state of Washington have now passed a bill to tax people's incomes of greater than $1 million at the rate of 9.9%, which moves them from a state with no income tax to a state with the fifth highest marginal tax rate. And so there was an article, it's called How to Hollow Out Your State Economy. And this is written by Dr. Arthur Laffer
Oh, we know Art Laffer.
Yeah, and a great economist.
Yes.
And
who
Steve,
left California and moved to Tennessee because he got fed up with California's public policy.
That was 15 or 20 years ago.
Yes, right.
And then Stephen Moore, who's also a brilliant economist.
Yes.
But at any rate, what they did was they went back, and what makes Arthur Laffer interesting as an economist is that he always uses data to support his point. It's not it's fair. This is about fairness. He doesn't think that way. He says, okay, will it benefit society or not, and is there data that we can look to to determine that? And so what Arthur Laffer and Stephen Moore did was they went back and found that there are 11 states that previously did not have an income tax that passed an income tax between 1960 and since then, probably 1990, because all of them except Connecticut had passed the state income tax by 1970. Connecticut was the last state that didn't have an income tax to pass one, and that was in the 80s. And that was Lowell Weicker was the governor.
Right.
And so what they did was they took the data on those 11 states and said, how did those states do? Where were they at the time that they didn't have before they passed an income tax relative to the
before and after?
Before and after.
Right.
And here's what they discovered. This is fascinating. I'm quoting here, the 11 states in combination accounted for 1/3 of national output in 1970. Today, they account for slightly more than 1/5. So that is almost, if it were 1/6, that would be a 50% reduction. So it's about a 40% reduction in their share of the national output. And this is looking at them as a group. So if it was a single state, you could say, well, that's a one-off.
Right.
But when you take them all together, and every single one of them saw their share of the national income drop, every single one of them saw their share of the population of the United States drop. Every single one of them, this is really interesting, they all saw the growth in their state and local tax revenue decline. They saw the growth of it decline once the income tax was imposed.
This is really interesting because I was just thinking I didn't know this was by Art Laffer when we started here.
Okay.
But, he is famous for introducing the for supply-side economics and the Laffer curve, which looks like a bell curve. And his point was that a higher tax rate doesn't always produce more tax revenue.
Right.
It declines because people avoid the economic activity. It's too punitive. And so there is an optimum at the top of the bell curve, and sometimes it means cutting tax rates so that tax income rises because you have more economic activity. This was heresy. This was just like blinding contradiction when he introduced it.
He wrote it on a cocktail napkin for Ronald Reagan.
Yes. And everybody thought that more tax rates produce more tax revenue, as if people's behavior doesn't change.
Right. So not only behavior, where they live.
That's part of their behavior.
That's part of their behavior.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of it is just I'm not going to work as hard.
Right.
I'm not going to take that risk.
Yes. Because I own 100% of the risk and 85% of the gain.
Right. So I thought that it was interesting. And then when I want to go on here, in terms of change in its share of national population, economic output and population, not one of the new income tax states registered positive numbers.
And yet you have now Washington about to join that group.
They're about to join that group, and here's the data. And here's the point I think I want to try to make here, is that the people who are enacting this data is available to them. This is not a secret, but they're doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get into that today, just the reason for it, because it also is a reason that the same reason for that is also going to be part of the reason for these other things. Is what motivates the Democrat Party or the left now, what motivates them versus what motivates most Republicans. And I'm not going to say the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is not as clear in terms of focus as the Democrat Party is. and what motivates Republicans is not as clear as what motivates Democrats. But the state of Washington, and here's one other thing that I find fascinating, and this relates to Tennessee, our home state, and that is in 1933, the state of Washington, Supreme Court of Washington State said an income tax in Washington is unconstitutional. It was also in the 30s in Tennessee that the Supreme Court said an income tax was unconstitutional.
Yeah.
In 1999, the Democrats tried to pass a state income tax here in Tennessee, and it failed. It got very, very close, but it failed. But for 15 years leading up to 1999, there was a constant drumbeat claiming that an income tax in Tennessee was constitutional, even though the Supreme Court of Tennessee had previously ruled it wasn't, and the Constitution had never been amended. So the people who oppose the state income tax in Washington and believe it's bad for the state, which it is, they're hoping that the Supreme Court strikes down the law if the governor signs it, because it's sitting on his desk to be signed.
And he's expected to sign it.
He is expected. Yes,
Yeah.
he has said he will sign
So
it.
there will be a lawsuit, and then the question is, well, the Supreme Court said, oh, those old guys 100 years ago, or not, what is it?
About 100 years,
92
almost.
years ago,
Yeah.
were, they were just wrong.
Yeah, they were wrong. So we will see. So that's one that we'll refer to it from time to time. But I think it was fascinating that Art Laffer and Stephen Moore went and did a study on the states that had passed an income tax. I know that Art Laffer has a lot of that data at his fingertips because that's what he does, and he's wonderful at it. So at any rate.
This story reminds me of a quote, and I wish I knew who said it, and it is, in God we trust, everyone else bring data.
There you go. Very good. I like that. All righty. Well, let's get to the subjects that you want to talk about that are topics of the day.
Yeah.
And the first one, and it's not just the funding of DHS, although that's the one that the media talks about. It's DHS, FEMA, it's TSA, it's Border Security, and the Coast Guard and ICE.
So let me test my understanding of this. I believe all of those are components of the DHS.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it is DHS generally. The Democrats are trying to split out everything else but ICE. They'd like to authorize everything else, and TSA is out, and it's caused a lot of problems this last couple of weeks during spring break with people with flights canceled, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That's pretty squarely on the Democrats because they want to authorize the funding for DHS, which is the Transportation Security Agency, right? TSA, is that what it stands for?
TSA, yeah.
Yeah. They're willing to fund TSA, but not willing to fund ICE.
And they didn't want to fund Border Security either.
Right.
Schumer has said he's willing to do that now to fund Border
Everything
Security.
except ICE.
Yes. But the question that I would have, and I've seen people interviewed, and I've seen Democrats who are interviewed, but nobody asks them this question: if ICE didn't exist, how would people who are here illegally and who have committed a crime, where even Democrats believe they should be deported, what agency would deport them if there is no ICE? Because that's what their job is.
Yeah, who would implement the law?
Who would do it? Who would actually do it?
Right.
And I've not heard that question asked, and it's not there's not an agency that has that responsibility now, because ICE has that responsibility.
Right.
So it's at loggerheads.
Right.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball. I think it is the Congress. The Congress has the authority to fund things and not fund things. So if you don't want something to happen, let's say you don't want fraud to happen in Medicare, you can just defund Medicare. Nobody's going to do that.
Well, now let's be clear. Let's be clear about something.
Yeah.
This has passed the House. The funding has passed the House.
Yes, but not the Senate.
It has not passed the Senate, and it's not a majority of the Senate that's against it. It's less than 50.
Yes.
So it is. The Democrats are using the filibuster.
Yeah.
They're using the 60 rule to oppose it. So it's not as if this is not a bipartisan.
These are the way the rules in the Senate works, because it's not supposed to be the 51 one side with 51 votes gets everything they want.
Correct.
Right. There's a reason for this.
Yes.
And people don't want to do away with the filibuster so that minorities are not just trampled on. Then you get a swing, right? One side gets 51, then the other side gets 51 and undoes everything. That's unstable and chaotic. So there's a reason that they have those kind of rules. But still, your point is that there is a majority in both houses to fund all of DHS, but the Senate rules won't let them accomplish that.
The only Democrat who wants to fund DHS in the Senate is Fetterman.
Right.
Yeah. So it will continue at loggerheads until there's a break, and Trump has made very clear what he's offered a couple of compromises that are minor, but they're not sufficient for the Democrats. Does it go on for months, or does it, or do they come up with some faux? Do the Democrats come up with some faux reason for approving it?
Faux meaning F-A-U-X, false?
Mean false.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's typically the way these things get resolved, right?
It kind of is, yeah.
Somebody makes up something that's news that changes things.
Yeah.
And now you have a person in Illinois who has just won the Democratic primary with a promise to confront Schumer and get rid of Schumer.
Yeah,
because
but
my point is there's a lot of progressives that think Schumer is too accommodating.
Yes.
He settled before and let the government get funded without confronting him further and keeping it shut down until the progressive left got what it wanted.
Right. So this person who's won the Democrat primary is not somebody who is going to be more accommodating. This person will be even less accommodating.
More confrontational.
More confrontational.
Yeah.
And
so this is my point in putting these three things together. You have three big confrontations going on without a real clear view of how they're going to get resolved.
Okay.
And they have to be resolved at some point.
Well,
don't you think?
At some point, yes. Now the SAVE Act is different in the sense it doesn't have to get resolved.
Fair enough. Yeah,
that one doesn't have to get resolved. So let's
live with the status quo and not change anything.
Let's shift gears to the SAVE Act.
Okay,
and let's define what the SAVE Act is. It is a bill that has passed the House. It is in the Senate, where once again a majority has voted to put the SAVE Act on the floor for debate.
Right. Yes.
That's the first thing that has to be done with a bill is to put it up for debate.
Right.
And the SAVE Act is a bill that will require that people who register to vote provide proof of citizenship. Yes. And there are various ways to prove citizenship.
Yes.
And then when you vote, you must show voter ID. That's the essence. It also greatly restricts mail-in ballots, and it completely restricts mail-out ballots. Now, the difference between a mail-in ballot and mail-out ballots is there are some states that just mail out ballots to every registered voter that they have in their database, and many of those registered voters have either moved or many of them are dead, and many of them are illegal immigrants.
And it's an invitation to fraud for somebody to pick up that outgoing ballot and fill it out and pretend they're the person it was intended.
Or go around and frankly pay people to fill out the ballot in front of them.
Right.
And
that's
so they can then pick it. It's called that's harvesting. So that isn't theoretical. That happens. Vote harvesting happens. And in the states that have the mail out ballots, voter harvesting is almost always allowed.
Yeah.
And so those are the issues, is to try to improve the integrity. Now, in Tennessee, for example, you do not have to provide proof of citizenship in Tennessee to register. You do have to prove proof of residency, and you have to prove your identity.
Right.
You do have to prove that.
Right.
And then in order to vote in Tennessee, you don't have to show your registration anymore, but you do have to show a voter ID. You have to show some form of ID.
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting. There is no mail-out voting in Tennessee. And
there is mail-in voting.
You can request a ballot.
Right.
But there are four I'm not going to get all four of them, but there are four specific reasons that any of those four that you can request a ballot.
Like if you're in the military overseas is one, I think.
Or if you are old and you can't get to the polls. In other words, they're very specific. And so the number of people who vote by mail in Tennessee is relatively small because we have early voting that lasts for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we're now up to 60 or 70% of people in Tennessee who vote early.
Before Election Day. By going to the polls and presenting their identification. There are a number of states, and I don't know how many, I wish I had that, but there are a number of states that do require proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. Mm-hmm.
And the article that I read about those states, their voter turnout is about the national average.
So it doesn't suppress the vote to require an ID?
It does not suppress the vote because we have enough states that require it so that we can look at the data.
Yeah.
We can look at the data and prove that. So let's talk about the process of whether or not it is possible to pass the SAVE Act without reaching a majority of 60. And I have researched this and found that there is a way to do it if Republicans decide that they will stick together on this and do it.
So we're talking about now the Senate. House has passed
in the
it.
Senate, right.
Trump has said he's not going to sign any other legislation until he gets this.
That's what he has said.
That's what he said. I wonder how long he can sustain that. But in the Senate, then, the rules require 60 unless you do away with the filibuster. There's some people that are saying –
No.
No? Am I wrong?
Yes, you're wrong.
Okay. I thought there was a way to get to 51 if you break some of the current rules where they could just pass it with 51 votes. But as it stands, they got to pass it with 60. I'm
going to tell you what the path is.
All right.
I'm going to tell you what the path is. I looked this up, and this is from the Center for Renewing America, explaining the talking filibuster. And the rules on the – and by the way, these are Senate rules. This article goes into and explains each of the rules. So there are these Senate rules that go back decades and in some cases more than a century.
Right.
And if the majority party, but not 60 votes, but the majority party votes to put the bill on the floor for debate, and then votes to invoke the rule requiring a talking filibuster, which means that if you oppose the bill, you can stand up and talk as long as you are able under the rules of a filibuster, which is you cannot eat, you cannot stop talking, meaning you can't take a break, you cannot take a bathroom break. So there's a physical limitation as to how long any one person can stand up and talk.
Can I intervene just for a second?
Yes, please.
My understanding is this is what a filibuster used to be.
Yes.
It was a way that people developed to stall legislation they didn't want to pass when they didn't have the votes to stop it.
Right.
They would stall and hope that something happened in the meantime.
And
the
so,
only way they had to do it was just to keep speaking.
Right.
Now, at somewhere they just stopped that and said, we're just going to agree. It's like taking a base on balls. You don't have to throw 4 pitches. You just declare it's going to be a filibustered, and nobody's doing all the talking.
Right. But in between that, because the filibuster could go on forever and ever and people could take breaks and come back and keep talking, the Senate passed a rule that said if you start your filibuster,
you're talking filibuster.
You're talking your individual part of the whole filibuster. You can't take a bathroom break.
Right.
So in other words, the Senate passed a rule to limit how long that this process
could go on. Put further conditions on what a talking filibuster looks like. I think another condition is that any senator wishing to participate can only talk twice.
That's
they
the
talk
other one.
until they run out, then somebody else takes over. They can come back. So let's say you have 49 senators in the minority party that don't want something to pass.
Right.
You basically have 98 times that they can speak as long as they can stand it.
Yep.
And so this goes on for days, maybe a week or two.
Goes on weeks.
Yeah.
Can go on weeks. And but then after that is done, and after every senator in opposition has had a chance to speak twice, the bill can go to the Senate floor for a simple majority vote. So you don't have to do away with the filibuster entirely.
Okay. That's why you're objecting to my comment earlier. You don't have to do away with it. These rules allow you to get to a simple majority.
Yes, and pass a bill that is not a reconciliation bill.
Right.
Reconciliation, the Senate rules for reconciliation bills, meaning the big budgets.
Right.
Those do only require 51, and the party in power can invoke reconciliation. So the SAVE Act will pass if the Republican majority
sticks together
and forces the Democrats to go through this very, very arduous process that does have an end point. End point.
Yeah.
And so we'll be following that, because between now and next week, the talking filibuster will either have started or not. And if it has not started, then that means there's not enough Republicans. It only takes 4 Republicans, because Vance doesn't get to vote on this. On this question. It only takes 4. In fact, it only takes 3 Republicans to oppose to defect on the talking filibuster. So we'll see.
This reminds me of the rules for overtime in football. Where you basically still have a standoff. It's tied, and they keep tightening the rules, right? Where it's going to force some kind of decision in real time.
Yeah,
right. So you're not there forever.
Yeah, but in this case, if Republicans don't stick together, then the SAVE Act will not pass.
Right.
If they do stick together, it will pass.
Yeah.
So that's
under the rules. I'm just saying the rules are really interesting because they sound arcane, but that's the way you resolve a stalemate.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, if they don't stick together, the stalemate will remain. In the case of DHS, it won't pass.
It won't pass.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which means that the stalemate on voting will remain.
Well, the status quo will remain.
Status quo will remain, which is And so at any rate, let's move to the third. The third topic is the Iran war. I'm going to call it a war because you and I are not legally bound by the terms.
Yes.
But it is interesting. I went back and looked, and the last time that the Congress actually declared war was World War II.
Yes.
So we've had many, many wars. The Korean War is called the Korean War. Congress never declared war in that case, and it lasted for
years.
It lasted for 2 or 3 years, and there were 50,000 Americans who died. Right. Vietnam was the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And it lasted for about 12 years, and over 50,000 Americans died, and there was never a declared war. And
there have been a lot of claims that Trump did not have the authority to do this without Congress declaring war.
Right.
And the counter to that is that it's happened a dozen times.
Many, many, many times.
Because also Obama did some bombing in Libya? Was it Libya?
Yes. Because that's when Hillary Clinton couldn't be found. Yes.
Yeah, and Clinton bombed Yugoslavia, Serbia.
Yes, he bombed Serbia. And so this also gets into this thing where people say, well, you cannot even do what Trump did unless there is an imminent threat to the United States. Well, when Clinton bombed Serbia, he said it was to stop the ethnic cleansing that was going on in Serbia. Well, that certainly isn't an imminent threat to the United States, and it's not even a threat to our interests. And bombing Libya and overthrowing Gaddafi, there wasn't any imminent threat to the United States. And so the imminent threat is something that people say, and then they try to say that that's a matter of law. It's not. Now, Fetterman's pretty interesting on this because he's the only Democrat who supports what Trump is doing. And when he's interviewed, he said, the president, the requirements are that he has 48 hours to come to Congress and tell Congress what he did. Not to get permission, but to tell him what he did.
Right.
And then he has 60 days to do it before he has to do something else. And I'm not quite sure what the something else is at that point because the bombing of Serbia lasted more than 60 days. And the Korean War and the Vietnam War lasted many years.
And in fact,
the Afghan War, that's another one.
Yeah. My understanding is that the White House has queued up a bill to spend $200 billion to fund the Iran war.
And that then becomes the sticking point. If I look at where there is leverage, is Trump is now going to Congress to ask for money to fund his war effort,
which is presumably to keep going after 60 days. Is that right?
Yes, $200 billion lasts way past 60 days.
Yeah,
and so that part will be interesting. Now let's now that we've kind of laid out that kind of the legal framework, now you get into the political framework,
right?
As to whether or not this is going to be. Well, I tell you what. Before we get to the political, let's get to the fundamental question about whether or not Iran is a rogue state. That Trump has said, and many others have said, many other presidents have said, that Iran is a terrorist state that funds terrorism all throughout the Middle East and abroad. Do you believe that to be a true statement?
I think it's not even a really realistic question. It's just so obvious to me that it's true.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So given that is true, the imminent threat thing, one of the things that's interesting is when Republicans who are speaking on behalf of what Trump is doing, they say, look, this goes back 47 years.
Yeah.
Iran has been killing American troops and American people, civilians, for 47 years.
Right.
And they've been doing it regularly, and it's a policy of theirs. They support Hezbollah, they support Hamas, they support Houthis, and they have supported terrorist attacks in Africa on our embassies. We don't know whether or not they support some of the terrorist attacks, the recent terrorist attacks that have gone on here in the U.S., the small ones. We do know that they were party to 9/11. That they weren't the main cause, but they were party to it. And so whether or not they pose an imminent threat, I think any reasonable person understands and agrees that they pose a threat that is an ongoing threat. Do you want to end that ongoing threat? And this gets into the question is if the answer is yes, then there's two ways to do it: through diplomacy or through action. And I think the people who say it needs to be done diplomatically, haven't we been trying that for 40 years?
Yeah, I would say they are idealists who do not have a finger on how things work in the world.
Well, not just how things work in the world, but Iran in particular. Because I look at Iran personally, I look at them as similar to Hitler in the sense that Hitler was not a person that could be negotiated with. We know that historically because we know that attempts were made over and over and over again to negotiate with Hitler over and over again. And every time that he would say he agreed to something, he would attack and subdue another country.
Yeah, well, Neville Chamberlain was famous for believing he could make an agreement with Hitler, right? It was called appeasement.
Well, appeasement was the strategy.
Yeah.
And peace in our time where holds up the
that was an insistence that diplomacy can work.
Yes.
And other people you might call realists, the idealists, I would call that. Somebody that believes that this principle, this ideal is going to hold, that we can talk our differences out. Other people get exhausted and say that's not going to happen, and it's going to take force to change this.
But I'm going to push back just a hair here because I think there's some adversaries where diplomacy is better than war. Our relationship with China, it's a competitive relationship. In some ways, it's economically beneficial to each side, but in other ways, it's adversarial.
Sure.
And to the extent it's adversarial, we still try to settle our differences.
Sure.
Diplomatically,
right?
Because it's in the interests of both parties at this point.
Right.
See that as the appropriate and best. It's in their best interest.
I think we're agreeing and not disagreeing.
Yeah, but Iran. What I'm saying is, Iran has since 1979 has always been a government that believes that at the end of time, Islam will be the only religion on the planet, and that it is its objective to make that happen. Well, that's and to do it by any means necessary.
Right.
And so if the world, the question for me is now that Trump has done what he's done, is will the world be a better place if Trump succeeds in achieving the goals that he has laid out. And one of those goals now includes regime change.
Yes.
It does include that. And so that's where this is. And politically, the political implications are, the last poll I saw, about 84% of Republicans support what Trump is doing, and only 6% of Democrats support what Trump is doing.
Then do you think that 6% is motivated by genuine belief and idealistic understanding that a talking cure is available? Or do you think they don't want Trump to have that win?
No, the 6% are the ones who support Trump. The 94%,
which means almost all the Democrats oppose Trump.
So, are you asking me about the ones who support him?
I'm talking about the Democratic Party as a whole. The 94%,
right.
Almost all of them,
right.
are opposing him. I'm saying, do you think it's because they all believe that there is a talking cure, there's a diplomatic solution available, and they don't want to go to war when that's available? I think they're wrong if they believe that. But do you think that's what they believe, or do you think that they understand that force is going to be required to resolve this, and they don't want Trump to be the one to get the win?
Okay, I'm going to try to answer that because you asked it in two parts.
Yes.
No president since 1979 until Trump has confronted and decided to use force.
Yes.
So even if they said that Iran is a terrible country, and they have, every single president has said Iran is a terrible country and it cannot have nuclear weapons and all these different things, but none of them have acted on what they've said.
They gave them bribes, hundreds of billions of dollars to try to bring them around, persuade them. They thought that would work, and it clearly did not work.
That's correct. So to the question of are there Democrats who believe that diplomacy is better than war, the answer to that is virtually all Democrats believe that diplomacy is better than war, even to the point where if diplomacy fails, it would be
hope for it.
They still hope for it, and so they're not willing to go to war on that. At least they're not willing to do it with Trump. When Clinton bombed Serbia, the two parties there, the Muslims were the ones who were being ethnically cleansed, and I don't remember what the word that was used to describe the Serbian. I'm going to use the term Serbian nationalists.
Yes,
I don't think that was necessarily the term.
Yeah.
But there was not, and Milosevic was the guy in charge, and he was the one who was attacking the Muslims. And when Clinton did that, the Democrats supported that use of force.
Yes.
When Obama attacked Libya, Democrats supported that use of force. So it's not that Democrats always oppose force, but they certainly oppose force when it comes to Trump, because I think Fetterman has said it best when Fetterman was asked, why do Democrats oppose Trump's trying to destroy the regime in Iran? And he said the answer is TDS.
Yeah, Trump derangement
syndrome. There are just almost all these Democrats who oppose Trump no matter what it is. And I think that that's correct.
I think it's true. But one other example comes to mind. Let me ask you about this, and that is Bush. He went to war in Iraq, and he got congressional approval, if you recall that. Hillary Clinton and others voted for it.
Right.
And then when things didn't go well, they said, this is Bush's folly.
Right.
He was an idiot to do this.
Right.
So they did support it, and then they didn't support it.
Right. And by the way, both of those things you could say were entirely reasonable. What we could have is a short discussion. What is the difference, if there is one, between Bush's strategy in Iraq and Trump's strategy in Iran? And I would describe Bush's strategy in Iraq was nation building, and that also was his strategy in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And Obama adopted the same strategy, and Biden adopted the same strategy. Well, I take that back, because Biden pulled out of Afghanistan. It was a terrible way he pulled out, but he just finally threw up his hands and he said nation building in Afghanistan is not going to work. And the way he pulled out, I think, was terrible.
Costly, yeah.
In Iraq, we still have there's still a green zone in Iraq, so we still have troops in Iraq supporting the nation building effort in Iraq, and it is the troops in Iraq that are oftentimes the target of the Iranian regime.
Yeah, I was going to say a little bit earlier when we were talking about imminent threat. I think the natural understanding of that is an imminent threat to the homeland.
Yes.
To the North American landmass that we have.
Right.
But we have territories all around. Alaska is a separate one. It's far more vulnerable to Russia, for instance. But we have embassies that are our territory. Legally,
yes.
they are American territory. Our
yes.
bases.
Our bases.
I think they're rented to us, but I think they're considered sovereign territory of the United States. And if they're attacked, it's an attack on the United States, on United States citizens who are in the military.
Right. And so Iran was constantly.
And it's clearly an imminent threat to them.
Yes.
From Iran.
Yes, and that's why they're there.
Yeah.
Is to protect against Iran. So at any rate, so what you have is you now have Trump has, and I do believe this when he says this. He says we're not going to have troops on the ground. This isn't an endless war, and we're not going to be into nation building. And so if that's true, then he has a goal in mind. There's part of the goal that he has articulated very, very clearly. There's a last part of his goal is on the regime change, which he's not articulated the strategy to achieve that clearly, and I'm not sure he should, because that strategy could very well, you hearken back to Alexander the Great, and Alexander conquered many, many lands, and he did it not by fighting, but by having spies go to the other side and find generals who hated the leader of the country.
Yeah, he co-opted them.
He co-opted them and said, you have a choice. You can overthrow your tyrannical leader and then become the leader yourself, and your people will prosper, or we're going to go to war and you will personally be killed. Well, that'll get somebody's attention.
Yeah.
And Trump has said, I'm going to keep killing the military people and the security people until we get a resolution. So that to me is, I believe that there is working going on right now in Iran to identify, and they may have already identified them, personnel in the military who would be part of overthrowing the current regime. Mm-hmm. And every time somebody pops their head up as a new leader of either security or the military, they're not lasting more than a week. And so I think that part will continue.
The intelligence that's being gathered on that is just
I think it must be amazing. And
Iran knows it. I think they've just killed 500 people or something that are suspected of being spies for Israel and or for us.
They may have, but and they may have gotten some, but it's going to continue. But
the point is there are people on the inside there that are looking for the overthrow of their own system.
Yes. And so I think that is Trump's strategy. And in the meantime, his strategy, along with Israel, is to continue to pick off. They've identified probably 1,000 leaders and they're trying to pick them off one at a time.
Right.
And I think they're picking them off every day.
To me, the question is what happens after 60 days.
That was going to be my next point, because the end of 60 days is April 30th. And between now and April 30th, I believe that Trump will run out of the munitions that he has to continue the pounding that he's doing. Now, I think by the time he runs out of those, I don't think Iran will have any. But that doesn't mean that they can't try to rebuild.
Yes.
And so Trump will need funding to continue to prosecute the war to a conclusion.
And you still have Israel that would be willing to continue. The question, I would guess then, is do you have efforts in the Congress of the United States to cut them off and not sell them more weapons to continue doing that?
Well, that's true.
Somebody may try to do that.
I'm not sure that Israel by itself, without the air cover and without the targeted drones, I'm not sure that they can be effective in completing. If the mission is to have a regime that is friendly to the Middle East and friendly to I'm not going to say they're adversaries of China, but a non-ally of China would be the way I would describe it. If that is the goal, I believe that will require some level of Democrat support. And if there's no support by Democrats, then the question becomes, how does that affect the midterm elections in terms of the independents?
Yeah.
Because our country is roughly divided into thirds politically. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen the polls on where independents stand, at least polls that I think are reasonable or accurate. So those are the three topics, and my guess is that when we come back next week, they'll still be there. The one difference in those three is I think we'll know whether or not the talking filibuster is going to be a strategy that the Republicans are able to hold together to implement on the SAVE Act. Right. And if they do, then I would, if the talking filibuster is going, then I will predict that the SAVE Act will ultimately pass. If the talking filibuster is not going, it will not pass, because that would mean that there's 6 or 7% of Republicans allied with 100% of Democrats who do not think that voter integrity is a problem. And by the way, I do want to get to something there. And I don't know if I got into some of this data, but I'll be very quick. The Journal of Electoral Studies, which has been around since 1935, here's some of the data that they have found. Roughly 1/4 of non-citizens in the U.S. were likely registered to vote. That's a quarter. 6.4% of non-citizens actually vote. There's about 30 million total non-citizens. 12 to 15 million came in under Biden. There were already 10 to 15 million that were here. So that means there's about 1,800,000 people who are here.
Just under 2 million.
Under 2 million who are here illegally, who are voting in our congressional elections. That is not nothing.
It's plenty to swing. I mean, some of these are
congressional and Senate seats are determined by that.
Yeah, but some of them margins are tens of thousands of votes.
I know.
2 million is enough.
Yes. 8% of illegal immigrants are, quote, reported to have voted for Barack Obama. Now, the question is whether or not 8% of illegal immigrants voted for his opponent to offset it. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Illegal, and then the last one is illegal votes cast by non-citizens likely changed important election outcomes in favor of Democrats. This is the conclusion from the Journal of Electoral Studies, including electoral college votes and a pivotal U.S. Senate race that enabled Democrats to pass Obamacare. So
if that's true, and I happen to think it sounds true, I don't have the data and didn't.
Well, these people have been around since 1935.
Assuming they're credible and all that, it's very easy to see why the Democrats would oppose the SAVE Act.
Yes, and it also shows you why the SAVE Act is essential if we want to have integrity in our elections.
Yeah.
If the American people, and by the way, 85% of people when they're polled want to have voter ID. So this is an uphill battle for Democrats to continue to allow the current situation to remain. But if the current situation means that 1.5 million to 2 million illegal immigrants are voting in our elections, that's terrible.
Well, very high percentages, similar percentages, I think, want the border to be enforced.
Yes,
but the Democrats have been able to continue, until Trump, had been able to continue leaving the border open, despite clear opposition.
And if they get the presidency again, the border will likely be opened again.
Yeah.
Because there will not have been a change in the law. It didn't require a change in the law to have border security,
which is what was claimed all during Biden's term.
Right. And
Trump showed that to be false.
Yeah. So, Michael, that's where we are, and we'll follow the Washington State tax issue because it's absolutely relevant to at least the state of Washington and also to Tennessee, because there'll probably be some wealthy people from Washington who decide to move from Washington, and some will land in Tennessee.
Well, as we've talked before, there's this great shift. There's the shift to the Sun Belt that's been described for decades as if it's weather-related. But I think it's clearer and clearer that people are leaving high-tax, high-regulation states like California, like Illinois, like New York, Connecticut, et cetera, because we see them. They come here, but they go in even greater numbers to Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas.
Yes. Yeah, the Carolinas do have a low income tax. Nevada's picking up a huge number of people.
I should have included them.
Yeah. And so, well, Michael, we will conclude today's podcast, and we tried to stay pretty much on point on those 4 subjects. I think we did a very good job for us.
Yes.
In doing that. And
there's a lot of rabbits to chase, and it's interesting to try to maintain a coherent theme while we touch on all these interesting little pieces of it.
So we'll be back. See you next week.
Okay.
Thanks.